today I want to share or talk about SAP migration. I know that there's a lot of, when looking at the focus group and the migration and all these things that are going on, it is really one of the things that you need to plan. What are you actually going to do with your migrations and what are going on there. So I hope that today I'll be providing a little value about what you can actually do to optimize these things and making sure that you save time on your project and lower the risk. And I think that is some of the key aspects of any migration, because as we get to later, it's not gonna give you a lot of more customers to have done a migration. So my name is Daniel Graverson. I guess I'm missing an SAP mentor. So yeah, I've been working with SAP integration for 15 years. I'm an SAP mentor and been doing a lot of integration over the years. Yeah, just work with SAP PI now, cloud integration, and I can see there's a lot of things that are in this area. And it makes a lot of sense to have all the background, but the area where, like, well, the general ABAP developer just doing a little PI is probably gone. Now you need to be a lot more specialized in integration and figure out what are the full landscapes of integrations. So the things I wanted to talk with you about today is migrations, and what are why do we want to do a migration, what are the purposes behind it and stuff like that, what the business case, and then I want to share a little about some of the 7 steps that we can do, or that I see in a migration that is interesting there. And then I'll share some of the different tools that we have that actually can help you if you're doing any migrations in the process. So why do you want to migrate? So obviously it all depends on what kind of platform you're on and what's going on there. So you want a simpler platform, and that makes it easier. So going from a dual stack PI to a simple stack PI is a simpler platform. You have some different ways you can develop and work with things, and there's a different licensing, and then obviously it comes to your agreement with the account manager, how that's going on, because the previously was based on the number of gigabyte you have if you had the PI license. Now you have a core CPU based license, so that makes a little of a difference. Then one of the big things is, if you have like a dual stack system and you know you need to do a migration at any time, the more you're doing development on that, if you're doing CCPPMs, you would just get a larger technical debt that you need to work on and ensure that it works. And then you want to make sure that the platform still works and is being updated continuously. Så har jeg ikke delt skærmen. Okay, no, good. Sorry, that was a bit of a challenge. Good. Okay, so yeah, not much. Just wanted to share these few slides. Why we want to migrate, and then the business case on doing a migration. And then the problem is that, at least if you have an old PI system, then sometimes you run into Java problems. I think I have one client where whenever we're doing work on it, there's problems on it, and we need to figure out how to solve that. Downloading the old Java version and running on some VM, and it's just terrible. And then obviously some of these things may also be problematic running. And obviously running a so critical platform that's no longer supported is kind of a no-go in most occasions. And then some of the newer development is a lot easier to do in new platforms. So you want to do development in the newest platform because then you can achieve the speed of this and deal with all the things there. So one of the things is CPI, that you can run it on the PO system that gives you some benefit of what you can actually do with regards to technical processes. So the CCBPM or BPM has some downsides, and here the CPI has, well, it has some other things, but in some occasion it's a lot better. And then you got the B2B add-on instead of Seeburger for free, and I think that's also quite an important use case of these things. Then probably you want to pause the development for some period of time to ensure that you have all the development resources and handling of these things. But you can obviously still do development and do development on the new platform from a given point of time, and then say, okay, new things, and if we do changes, it has to happen on the new platform. But the longer time you have to have dual platforms running, the more a problem is it that we're going on. So one of the things that I've added recently to my understanding of this is understanding your integration, and that is pretty important about what is going on. And so previously there was just one option. You had the PI if you're on SAP shop. Now you just have, you have multiple different options, and you need to understand which of them is best and which makes most sense to use for your platform. And as it seems like right now, I see that this SAP Cloud Platform integration has a lot of places where you would get a better integration doing the development in that. And then obviously you want to consider, do we want to migrate this integration we have that's already running on our dual stack system to our new system, or do we want to do it on a new platform, or just migrate the development or do a new development? So SAP has one method, that's the ISAM methodology, Integration Solution Advisor methodology, that guides you through an understanding of all your integration landscape and what's going on in this area. And this gives you a lot of understanding of the purpose of your integration, and give you an understanding of where you should be moving your development, what's important in those cases. So the 7 steps, I recommend that you do the ISAM methodologies just to understand your landscape, what you want to achieve in the future, instead of just saying, well, blindly, we have to do a PI upgrade. Then figure out what's really the important things is there. So the 7 steps, and the first step is want to figure out what are the goals with your integration, and I think that ties a lot of into this. Then you want to look at your current integrations, and obviously this is also, well, as a lot of these things, they are intermingled. Then you want to look at your current integration, and that's also kind of an input to the Integration Solution Advisor methodology, understanding, well, we have these scenarios, how do we actually use them? Then you want to look at what are the different patterns we have, and also a topic from the Integration Solution Advisor, ISAM, where you say, well, we have this scenario, the best place to run this, or the place you want to do this, is in this platform, and then we can do it like that. you want to figure out how much resources does this take, what are the different phases in your migration. And step 6 is the development, and step 7 is testing. So the first 4 steps is kind of getting understanding what's going on, and then the last part is about delivering these things and how do we actually do this migration. And yeah, so why you wanna so you first have to figure out what's the reason you want to migrate, what can you achieve, and how can you actually sell this to the business. Is it to speed up some of your development, making it easier to run your scenario, have a cleanup, delete all those things that you're no longer using and is just giving a lot of problems that no one really understand what's there. You probably want to simplify the integration, so it's a lot easier to do the integration. Do you want to learn the new tools, or is this just something about the licensing, support, maintenance agreement that's better or has a different flavor? And then you want to look at the business cases. How do we actually sell this to the business? Then we want to get started understanding what you actually have in your current landscape. And if you have like a dual or a single stack system, it's really important to understand what are the different things, how much is actually running in the landscape. And most users would know that we are running daily 20,000 or 2 million iDocs, and is kind of bragging that this is so critical, our system is, we are the ones delivering most iDocs or something like that. But you need to break this down into different blocks and chunks and understand what's going on there. So what are the volumes of interfaces? How many do you have? What is used and what's not used? And obviously, if you have an interface that runs every 1st of January, then it may be difficult understanding where this is until 1st of January where it's not running or something like that. There's some challenges with synchronized interface where you cannot really understand if they're running or not. You probably also want a dialogue with the business and understanding. So we have 200 interfaces to this application. Is this something that you're going to develop on, or is this something that's actually going away and you have actually found a replacement for, so we can actually skip the migration of these interfaces? Also doing mapping of the different scenario or messages into criticality, time messages. It makes a lot of sense. And I would say whenever you're talking with business, all of them would say, well, these interfaces is so critical. If it's not running, it will happen these and these things, and the factory will be closed down for years and years, and that will obviously in some cases be a problem. But you want to figure out where these things is. So some of these interfaces has a higher criticality in others. And then you want to figure out what are the patterns that are used in your systems. So, we got some async, we got some BPMs that are doing collections, we got async bridges or whatever. Then the next step is you want to find some of these specific information about the interface. What are the receiver type, namespace, and the number of mappings, messages last month, and a lot of specific information about it. So I was looking at this one and said, well, actually, we could actually help you make this a lot better, because in this one you can just see we are running this interface, but you don't really know what is actually what are the objects behind all of this, and that can be pretty challenging and difficult figuring out. So with the Figaf IRT tool, we have created an application that would actually allow you to gather all of this data and figure out what are actually the message mappings that we are using. So you can see these are this message mapping is being executed 253 times estimately in this period of time. It contains, so the 4 steps is, first you want to install the Figaf IRT tool. Just go to figaf.com/IRT and download it. If you already have registered, you can just go to the link that you got when registering. You can actually run this on your own laptop. It doesn't take that long to install. You need a fairly good CPU, but I was running it on my Core i5 7th gen laptop, portable one, yesterday, and it was working out fine. So you can run this on almost all PCs. It just needs a Java version and be able to run Java applications. And then you simply just log in, connect to the PI system in this application. It will then download all directory and repository configuration, and it will then understand what are the links from message mapping all the way to the different IQs where this message mapping is used. Then we want to get the runtime data and show you what is actually being processed here. And the best way we found was simply to use this approach, where you go into the message monitor, select a date range where you want the data on, select export, and then you're getting some Excel document, which is not really Excel. And because it's a little difficult parsing, you just want to convert it in Excel to an Excel workbook. And then the magic happens, and this is where you would upload this into the Figaf IRT tool. So you select that I want to do this on my whatever PI system you have connected, upload this Excel report, and then it will go through this list and it will create an Excel report that looks like this, where we can see we have this message mapping that's called invoice in this folder. It's being used in these operation mappings, and it is coming, this data is being sent with these related, or these interfaces. It's been run 104 times with error, and 10,000 times was this message executed successfully. So this really breaks down a lot of all the objects that you have, so you can actually see what are the top message mappings that we have. And we will also include an option to understand what are the ABAP, the XSLT mappings that you're using, so you can see how many of those you're actually using in your application. And that will make it a lot easier to do the migration and understanding. And one thing that's really important is we also give you an idea about what are the Seeburger mappings you have, because Seeburger and the B2B, we'll cover that a little later, but they are different, and that also involves some migration effort. But yeah, this is a free part of the IRT tool. We haven't licensed this, so just install it, run it, and then you can get this report and see what's going on. Then once you have done that, you want to figure out what are actually the different scenarios that we're using in the application, and how we can actually do this better with some of the new tools. Back in the good old days, you had, if you wanted to collect IDEX, you need to create a CC BPM to do these things. And with some of these new tools, it may be possible to do it in a lot simpler way. And that's, or for instance, the sync-async bridge, where in the CC BPM world, you had to create a lot of different objects on it. Now it's just a simple extra field, or module you would install on 2 communication channels, and then you're actually good to go on this. So this really simplifies things on what you have to do. And obviously you can consider, is this something that's really important that I change, or is this just, well, semi-okay, or and then you want to figure out what are all the new components, how do they match into this. So have you Seeburger, have you could you actually do some of these things in the gateway instead of using the PI in some format to expose data. We do talk about Seeburger migration because that's one of the things where a lot of migration happens, and there's a lot of challenges what you're actually seeing there. So one of the biggest problems in a migration is that the code structure of the Seeburger is changing, and with that you want to figure out, you want to update it so you can use the B2B capabilities, the structure and data from there, and that's a lot easier with these new tools. And normally when users would go through it, so you would see here are 2 different views on the message mapping. Here we have the Seeburger. It would start with list, and then it has all of these attributes, whereas the B2B has a structure like this. And this means that once you're going through this, you would have to figure out, we would map the structure to this element, and yeah, so the structure of the elements is different, and so there is the mapping tool that you can use. It works in some scenarios, but also has some challenges, and you need to be keeping your tongue straight and ensure that you go the right path, and do it for the full mapping and not skip a step in the process, otherwise you'd have to start over again. And there's a lot of different sections where it suddenly changes. We have created the Seeburger migration tool, which is a migration tool that actually takes the full message mapping. So it will open the message mapping, it will check all the different mappings that you've used, and then we'll go through and say, okay, this DTM needs to be mapped to whatever this DTM, this element needs to be mapped to this one. So it will just take your existing mapping, update it, and then you got an error prone, or you got one way that you're doing all of the different mappings in, so you're pretty sure that the structure of them is all identical. There's a fixed price of just 100 euros per mapping that you want to update, which is a lot less than doing a new development or trying to figure out if we have done the development correctly. So go check that one out if you have Seeburger in your landscape. I think that will make a lot of sense for you. Then one of the other thing is, obviously this is something that requires a lot of resources. How do you actually do these things? And I think a lot of SAP customers are a bit tight on the number of developers they already have in the organization. So they probably want some extra external resources that they can engage with, and that can do some of the development. Because you probably want the existing developers to do all the new development and work on those things. So you probably want to figure out, how do we enhance the organization for this thing, and how long time will it take? One of the other constraints is how much is the business is going to be involved in this, and that obviously depends on a lot about how you're going to test these things. Do the business need to test and sign off on all of these different interfaces? Are you saying, okay, we will do the migration, we will test it and validate that the business, so that business don't need to be involved in this? Because as I said, the value for the business is not that high. They will it's just a technical thing they could care less about. Unless it breaks down, then they would suddenly care about it. But from a resource consumption, you also want to figure out how does this actually work and where do the business matter. So what are the migration phases that you actually want to go through? And I really like the idea about figuring out how the platform works, how we can actually get the system up and running as fast as possible, and be sure that the system is running, be sure that we test that all these different things is working, instead of just doing a full migration and then on one day say, now we're live and we can get to do some of these things. And so the faster you can get something into production, go live and validate and that this works, the better. So do a proof of concept, take and this is one of the reasons why we want to figure out what are the critical interfaces, that you can take some of these non-critical interfaces and say, okay, now we will just move them, and we have a backup plan, we know how to test it, we know all these different things, so we can see, okay, we can get all development done through our full new landscape, or however we're doing the migration, and just test that it works. And then we can go take some of the higher volume interfaces, or some of the places where it makes most sense to do migration. If you have some developer with specialties in some areas, obviously they would probably be better off doing development or migration of those things. I think one of the key areas here is also to avoid having a big backlog of migrated interfaces. So instead of doing releases every 3 to 6 months, then do it more frequently, because you would get more data about and learn faster, instead of having a large migration that's going live on a specific day. Then put it in smaller chunks, then people know, okay, on this Monday we would go live with these 5 interfaces. On the next Monday we'll take some other interfaces, so you can scale it in a way that makes sense for the business, but also that you can observe, monitor, and whenever you are doing new development or new changes, you can take some of these things, and then you want to do the critical interfaces, get them moved, and then all the rest. And obviously you want to see what are the changes to the existing interfaces before you are doing this, and how do you actually want to test this is important, and do we actually need to test it. So a migration, I've seen that there's actually 2 paths to this. One would be that you install a new system, do all development, transport between these things. The other would be, if you have like a PO system, upgrade it to a single stack, do the migration, and then go live on it. And then I've heard that you could split or delete the ABAP stack. I think that is, well, you need to know a lot about your system landscape and already be on the single stack for that to make sense. Otherwise, it's if you have a lot of dual stack connections in your landscape, that's going to be pretty difficult to do that. So I think the best would be to install a separate system, move all the software component versions you have, figure out, do we actually have any Java modules that we need to move that's being used. And I think from 7.31 to 7.5 there is some changes in adapter modules. It's not I think it took me 5-10 minutes per module to just change the few lines of code that needed it. But it is some rework that you just need to go through to ensure it. And if you have modules that are older, you probably want to do more rework on it. I do recommend that you use the development infrastructure, both for module development, because it makes some of the development easier, and you have just one place where you have the code instead of having some zip file of the software component versions. Then it becomes a little challenging finding the right data. Yeah, so get development infrastructure working. Then use the SAP migration tool. It's good to do migration and conversion of some interfaces or from some of the systems. It can also copy all the communication channels, update some of these things. If in some cases, if you have passwords, they may not be copied correctly, or may not be copied, and then you have to go through and figure out how do we update these things. Then you want to update your documentation if you are still using that we are running this now on this new system, and we have made these changes to the interface. Then you want to test, and I think that is one of the critical part of this, and I'd say that's one of the next slides. And then you want to transport it, validate it in QA, and go live with this. So testing is really important in this phase, and I think one of the big challenges that you often see in something like this is you don't want to involve your business partners in and say, well, we have done this technical upgrade, and we just want you to spend a couple of months or helping us test it. In that case, it's probably better that you can do maybe just test the connection is working, if that's the only thing that's being changed, but do a test that says we have done all of these migration, or the message we're seeing from the S4 system or ERP system to the partner looks identical. So we only need to test that the new connection works, and then it will be a lot easier to get them on board on the migration. Otherwise, you will be stuck with coordinating all this test with migration. The best way I've seen, and that's the approach we have taken with the Figaf tools, is to take production data, rerun it on your test data, whatever. But the live data is most cases best, because that is where the users are not thinking about making something easy and simple, but is focusing just on saying, I want a purchase order with these 3 different product items and categories, as I normally would, where in testing, in most cases, you just say, well, we have 3 purchase order, one with one category for each item, and because that's the way we normally test these things. So you want to collect a lot of the test data, figure out how this works, be able to, and with this you can actually prove it that nothing has changed. And there's some tools to document and support that this process works. So yeah, the big frustration I have with testing in a lot of cases with migration is that it does involve a lot of testing with the business, and yeah, as I said, they just want to see that they can create a purchase order, but not the complex purchase order that customers is making, because that will taking 15 minutes to do in the SAP system, or they don't even have the access to do it, or whatever. And your customer may not have access to the development system and stuff like that. and then that means, yeah, the data would be a lot less PI relevant. The simple one-line document that does not test the complexity, and especially if you have done EDI and have tried to make these mappings where the EDI really makes sense, then it becomes just so complicated. And a lot of the logic, you don't know how that's going to behave over a period of time. So that's why we've created the Figaf IRT tool to make the testing a lot faster for both development but also for migration, that you can take data from your productive system, run it through your test system, and then see that everything is as it's supposed to be. We have data anonymization, really simple built into it, meaning that you can even test with all the HR data that's confidential, and you just say, well, this is the structure of the document. I want to replace all names, all social security numbers, all salary information with something else. And then no one would know who is getting what information. So in most cases that would be something you would just say, well, we don't have that data, and you'd skip that test, which could be potential catastrophic, because that is probably a pretty important interface, and I think it could cause some frustration in the organization. It can also be used to document some of your scenarios that you have done, helping out with the support and a lot of other things that are going on. So there's a free version of it, and we have prices if you want to use this for real scenarios for 10,000 euros a year. And obviously, if you just want it for 1 year, it's okay. But I do hope that you want to use it for a longer period of time, because it would also make sense for extended duration of it. So you can get it at figaf.com/IRT. Next week we have a webinar that you can sign up to right now, and the link is also in the chat. So the purpose of this is just to show you what the CPI tool can do, how it can actually help speed up your migration, make it a lot easier to do validation, and how you can actually achieve something like a DevOps process in the organization with the PI systems. Obviously, there's a lot of documentation about how these things is and what they can do, but that is a useful tool for it. Go check out the tool Figaf IRT figaf.com/IRT. Download it and see how it works in your landscape. Now we have time for some questions. So if you have any questions, do put them into the chat.